Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Welcome back once again to the Corner of Truth and Courage. You're listening to Fortress of Faith. This is Tom Wallace. Folks, I'm going to jump into it's a mess. It's a messy story and situation in the United Kingdom. Tommy Robinson, if you're familiar with him at all, he's just been given a sentence of 18 months. He's been treated by the British government as a far-right activist and a person who is a troublemaker. And yet there's the other side of the coin. He considers himself as a person who's just simply trying to speak the truth of what's going on in his country, of how there's a two-tier system of policing in the United Kingdom, where they treat the citizens of England as villains and the immigrants, the Muslims, as victims. That the Muslims in the United Kingdom have a higher stage of protection than the actual Brits in their own country. We'll try to break that down and get you the backstory as best as I can in today's broadcast. Before we do, let me quickly remind you, we're in our fundraising appeal. We have an opportunity to expand our radio ministry on a network that covers some very big major cities in the United States, and they're offering us a great price, a great opportunity there. So basically, we need donations in two ways. Two ways you can help us. One, you can give us a one-time donation. We're trying to raise at least $12,000 for that. And we're trying to raise another $12,000 in monthly gifts. If you want to help us in that, we'll try to remember to give you the phone number at the end of the broadcast. I keep saying I will, and I forget. Write this number down in case I forget to give it to you at the close. 800-616-0082. That's 800-616-0082, or you can give safely, securely online at our website, fortressoffaith.com, fortressoffaith.com. All right, let's jump into this situation over in England. This mess that's going on in England, if it's not already happening up in Canada, it will soon be there. They're further along in this than America is, but it will come here too in America as well. And I hope we will learn from the mistakes that Europe has made so that we do not make those same mistakes. I've already seen some of that happen here in America to some extent. And again, let me say clearly, the problem isn't immigrants coming into your country. The problem is when a country allows kind of an uncontrolled immigration into their land, and they don't require assimilation of the immigrants that come into their nation. The Bible teaches the children of Israel that you were strangers once in the land. Anytime you see the word stranger in the Bible, that's kind of like our word foreigner or immigrant. And God said to the children of Israel, you were immigrants, you were strangers in another land. Now, so you know what it was like to be mistreated. And immigrants usually are. It's just the nature of the fallen curse, the nature of man, that we sometimes mistreat those who are not like us. It happens. Doesn't make it right, but it does happen. And so God told Israel, when the strangers come into your land, when foreigners come to your land, treat them like they were born amongst you, but require them to live like you require your own people to live. Require them to live to our standards, to our religious beliefs. I lived, for many years, 29 years of my life overseas as a stranger in another man's land. I was a guest. I never took that for granted. I was grateful of that, and grateful that I could do the work of the Lord in that land. So I'm not against immigrants. I was one for a major portion of my life. We've got to understand that when a Muslim comes into your country, they're tied to customs and ways that are detrimental to the ways of us here in the West that is largely Christian in nature. And so there's been a growing problem of the media and the sympathizers who aren't thinking things through. And this term of Islamophobia, they use that as a weapon to shut people down. And the police was seeing a lot of crime going on in their communities by Muslims. But the police didn't want to investigate it. They didn't want to deal with it because they didn't want to be charged as racist, as Islamophobes, as xenophobes. And as a result of it, the police kind of allowed the Muslims in a number of northern communities to develop these rape gangs. And the Muslim men were abusing the British girls as they were growing up. And part of the problem is because of a teaching in Islam in chapter 2, verse 223, speaking to men and women. It says, your wives are as a tilth unto you. So approach your tilth when and how ye will. What is a tilth? A tilth is a field to be plowed in. And a field is where you put your seed. I'm trying to put this as delicate as I possibly can. And so the idea here is that your wife is a field for you to plant your seed. And you do it any way, however way you want. You've got that right. So basically, women are just property to you, and you can sexually do whatever you want with them. They use this verse in the Quran as license to rape women, even your wives. And so they, even say, well, she's not his wife. Well, they do what they consider muta marriages. They consider their act as an act of a temporary marriage. So therefore, they're not committing adultery. It's a messed up thinking, but this is what they're born with in Islam. And they come over as immigrants into our country, see the kafir, that is a second-class citizen to them. They are superior. In Islam, if you're a Muslim, you're superior. And a kafir, someone who is a non-Muslim, is inferior to you. A lot of abuse has been going on. And in the city of Huddersfield, up in the northern part of England, which is 26% Muslim, this area of Bradford and Huddersfield is a community of that area there. 26% of that, almost a third of the population is Muslim. And so the non-Muslims there have been abused for over a decade. And finally, the police it had such a bad reputation that it became a national story and an issue about 10 years ago. And finally, they started doing arrests. And almost 40 people were arrested in Huddersfield and sentenced to long crimes. Finally, the law stepped in and do something. But the communities had some bad feelings. And not just there, we're talking in many places in Britain. And so now you got people like Tommy Robinson. Tommy is from Luton. That's not his real name, but that's the name, that he goes by. It's not necessary we know his real name, but he's known as Tommy Robinson. And he's been an activist and speaking out against it. Did he go about it the right way at first? No. He comes from a bit of a gang mentality, I believe. I've steered away from people like him. I know people like that, part of the National Front. When I was a kid, those people were called the National Front. We started a group, the English Defense League or something like that there. He's the founder of that. And I'll say this, that oftentimes you may be well-meaning, but sometimes you attract some people into your corner that shares the same sentiments and concerns about you, but they may not have the right methods about how they go about it. Well, Tommy Robinson has developed a very bad reputation. It's hurt him. And he's tried to clean up his ways. He realized, in his youth, he went about a lot of these things the wrong way. And so I have some sympathy for him because although he's changed the manner of how he's trying to fight this fight, because he went about it the wrong way. I've been opposing the way they've been fighting this fight. I support that it needs to be fought and stood against, but you've got to do it in the right way in the realms of the law. And I don't blame him completely, but he created such a bad reputation for him. Now he's trying to clean up his ways and to take on the access of being an activist as a journalist, to create movies and stories and stuff about it. Well, he got in the middle of a story of a fight that happened with some kids in Huddersfield, right in the area where, all these gay, Muslim gangs and raping and stuff. And so kids are kids. And there's a lot of hard, bad feelings passed down from parents to kids, and kids get into it themselves. And I don't know the details fully of the story of the bullying and who was right, but Tommy Robinson stepped in and tried to speak to another side of the story that the government wasn't saying. They were making the British kid as the villain and the Muslim kid as the pure little victim. And yet there was a lot of things coming out that Tommy was uncovering. This kid had threatened other girls with rape and violence and stuff. And so finally a bigger boy stood up to him and beat him up and poured water on him. And of course, they called that waterboarding and all that stuff, the way that the community reported it. And it became a big mess. Tommy Robinson was taken into court for libel. He was sued for libel against the Muslim kid. And the government in Britain has been working hard to try to protect the rights of immigrants. I get it. We need to do that. But it should not be lost on them that they also need to be protecting the rights of their citizens. And that's where they failed. And another example of it, there was a killing here recently in the summer of another immigrant, killing 3 British kids. And of course, it erupted. The tensions over there are just so hot, and it erupted a summer of violence and in the streets and riots, and the Brits rioting against the Muslims and the Muslims rioting against the Brits, and it's ugly. And of course, they were claiming, that this was a jihadi attack. And now it has been revealed it was. This kid had information. He was been recruited into Muslim terrorism. He had ricin in his possession, in his home. This was a terrorist attack. And the British government wanted to play it down like, no, it wasn't. It was just, it's anything but a terrorist act. And we've got to admit, Islam is a problem. Now, we don't blame every Muslim for it. Many Muslims are here to get away from it. About 8 out of 10, but the 2 out of 10 does pose problems. And there's a right way to deal with it. Let's pray for peace and understanding. And let's bring the truth of the gospel to these people to rescue them from Islam. Before we close, here's the number to help us expand. Number's 800-616-0082. Again, 800-616-0082. God bless you.